Most people think they're behind with money, and the terrifying part, they're right, but not for the reason they think. And here's the thing, most people never sit with long enough to actually feel. Your savings level doesn't just change your financial options. It changes your psychology. It changes how you sleep, how you talk to your partner, how you walk into a job you hate but can't leave, how you respond when something goes wrong, because something always goes wrong. We talk about money like it's math, like it's a spreadsheet problem. Add more, spend less, invest the difference. Simple. But it's not math. It's never been math. Because if it were math, most people would already be fine. The real thing, the part nobody's walking you through, is what actually happens to a person at each level. What you feel at 0. What quietly shifts when you hit 10,000. What changes in your chest when you cross 100. And what most people completely misunderstand about having a lot. This isn't a how to save money video. You've seen 100 of those. This is what your life actually looks like at every level of savings, from 0 all the way to 3 million. And I promise you, some of what you're about to hear is going to feel uncomfortably familiar. Before we get into the numbers, we need to talk about something that nobody in finance wants to admit. Money doesn't just sit in your account. It talks to you, not literally, but kind of literally. The balance you wake up to every morning sends a signal to your brain before you've even had coffee, before you've checked your phone, before you've decided what kind of day you're going to have. That number, whatever it is, has already set the tone, already told your nervous system whether today feels safe or not. And most people have no idea this is happening. They think their mood is about their job, their relationships, their sleep. And sure, those things matter. But underneath all of it, quietly running in the background like an app you forgot to close, is your financial reality. Just sitting there, shaping everything. Here's what I mean. 2 people wake up on a Monday morning. Same city, same kind of job, same age. One of them has $400 to their name. The other has $40,000 in savings. Now, on paper, that Monday is identical for both of them. Same alarm, same commute, same meeting they're dreading. But those 2 people are not having the same Monday. Not even close. The person with $400, their brain is in a low-grade emergency state. They might not even know it. They'd probably tell you they feel fine. But there's a background hum, a tension that never fully goes away. Every small expense becomes a micro-crisis. The car making a weird sound isn't just annoying, it's a threat. A friend's birthday dinner isn't just a nice evening. It's a calculation. The person with 40,000 isn't stress-free, but their nervous system has room to think, room to say no to things that don't serve them, room to be present in a conversation without half their brain doing math in the background. That's the thing nobody tells you about savings. It's not really about the money. It's about cognitive space, mental bandwidth, the ability to actually be in your own life instead of constantly managing the risk of it falling apart. And this is why, and stay with me here, 2 people can earn the exact same salary for 20 years and end up in completely different psychological realities. One of them quietly accumulated a cushion. The other spent everything, felt fine month to month, and then one day looked up and realized they have nothing to fall back on. Nothing. And that realization doesn't come gently. Most people in that situation don't say, I made financial mistakes. They say, I don't know what happened, because it didn't feel like a mistake in the moment. It felt like living. And that's the trap. That's the real trap. Because the absence of savings doesn't feel like danger when things are going okay. It only feels like danger when they stop going okay. And by then, the options are very different. So when we walk through these levels, 0 to 3 million, I'm not going to talk to you like a financial advisor reading from a chart. I'm going to show you what each level actually does to a person, what it costs them that isn't measured in dollars, and what they gain that has nothing to do with buying things. Because the real story of savings isn't about wealth. It's about what happens to a human being when they finally, or never, feel secure. Let's start at the bottom. And I mean the real bottom. $0 saved, maybe a little debt on top of that. This is where more people are living right now than most financial content will ever acknowledge. Because it's not comfortable to say out loud, but it's real. And if this is you, or if this was you, You already know what I'm about to describe. Life at zero savings is not just financially tight. It's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. Every single decision has weight, not big decisions. Small ones. Do I fill the tank all the way or just enough to get through the week? Do I go to the doctor or just wait and see? Do I tell my kid yes or find a reason to say not right now? These aren't dramatic moments. They're Tuesday. They're just Tuesday. And the exhausting part isn't even the decisions themselves. It's the mental load of making them constantly, the cognitive cost of living with zero margin. Research actually backs this up. Scarcity doesn't just affect your wallet, it occupies your mind. It crowds out other thinking. People living with financial scarcity score measurably lower on cognitive tests. Not because they're less intelligent, but because a significant portion of their mental capacity is already spoken for. So if you've ever felt like you couldn't think clearly when you were broke, you weren't imagining it. But here's what's strange about zero, and this is the part people don't expect. Zero feels normal after a while. Not good, not comfortable, but normal. The brain adapts. You stop noticing the low-grade stress because it's always there. You start making peace with it, and that peace, that adaptation, is actually one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a person financially, because it removes urgency. It makes the situation feel manageable even when it isn't. That's why a lot of people stay at zero far longer than they should. Not because they can't do better, but because they've gotten used to it. Now, something small shifts. Maybe a raise, maybe a side income. Maybe just a few months of being more intentional. And you cross into the $1,000 to $5,000 range. This level doesn't sound like much, but psychologically, it's enormous. For the first time, a small emergency doesn't automatically become a crisis. The car breaks down, and it's annoying, not catastrophic. That shift is hard to overstate, because when small problems stop becoming emergencies, something in your brain quietly relaxes. Not fully, but a little. Enough to think differently. Enough to start making slightly less reactive decisions. The problem with this level, and there is a problem, is that it feels like enough. It feels like safety, and it isn't. Not really, but it feels like it. And so a lot of people park here. For years, they've got a small cushion, things feel okay, and the motivation that drove them to save in the first place fades. They stop, right at the edge of something better, and they don't even notice. $10,000 is where something starts to shift in how other people perceive you, but more importantly, in how you perceive yourself. 10,000 feels like a real number. It feels like you've done something, and honestly, you have. But here's the quiet danger at 10,000. You start to feel like you deserve something, a trip, an upgrade, a reward for being responsible, and maybe you do deserve it. That's not the issue. The issue is that the reward often comes right out of the savings, and then you're back at 4,000, and the cycle restarts. This isn't a discipline failure, it's a psychology pattern. The brain treats savings milestones like finish lines. You cross the line, so now you rest. Except in this game, the line keeps moving, and resting means falling behind. 25,000 is a real cushion. 6 months of expenses for a lot of people. This is the first level where you start to feel what financial writers call optionality, the ability to make choices based on what you want rather than purely what you can afford. And something interesting happens here that I don't think gets talked about enough. You start to say no differently, not loudly, not dramatically, but when something comes up, an opportunity you don't want, a job offer that doesn't feel right, a relationship dynamic that isn't working, you start to have just enough ground beneath your feet to push back, to wait, to choose. Most people don't connect that to money. They think it's confidence, it's maturity, maybe therapy. And sure, maybe all of that, but a lot of it is just having enough saved that the cost of saying no isn't total financial exposure. That's not talked about enough. The connection between savings and personal power. Not power in some abstract sense. Just the quiet ability to protect your own time and choices without it being a catastrophe. 50,000. This is where life genuinely changes texture. Not dramatically. You're not suddenly living differently on the outside. Same apartment, maybe. Same job. But the inside experience of your life is different. The background noise, that low hum of financial anxiety, starts to get quieter. Not silent, but quieter. And in that quiet, People often start to think more clearly about what they actually want, which is sometimes uncomfortable in its own way, because when the financial panic isn't filling every corner of your brain, you start to notice other things. What you actually think about your career, what your relationship really feels like without money stress clouding it, whether the life you're living is the one you'd choose if you had a choice. 50,000 doesn't answer those questions, but it gives you enough silence to start asking them. And that is worth more than most people realize. $100,000. Say that number out loud if you haven't hit it yet. Just sit with it for a second, because something genuinely crosses over at 6 figures. And it's not what most people expect. It's not freedom. It's not relief, at least not immediately. What most people feel when they first cross 100,000 is disbelief, followed closely by fear. Fear that it'll disappear. Fear that they'll do something stupid and lose it. Fear that they don't actually deserve to be here and that the universe is about to correct a mistake. That sounds irrational, but it's incredibly common, and it's one of the reasons people make really strange financial decisions right after hitting a milestone they spent years working toward. They get conservative to the point of paralysis, or they suddenly get reckless, like they're trying to test whether it's real. Either way, the behavior gets weird, and nobody warns you about that. Here's what 100,000 actually gives you, practically speaking. It gives you time, real time. If everything fell apart tomorrow, job gone, income gone, you have a runway, months, maybe over a year, to figure out what comes next without making desperate decisions. And desperate decisions are almost always expensive ones. The ability to not be desperate is worth more than any investment return. But here's the contradiction nobody talks about at this level. $100,000 sounds like a lot, and compared to zero, it is. But it's also not very much. One serious medical event, one bad real estate decision, one period of unemployment that runs longer than expected, and you're looking at a very different number very quickly. So the people who handle this level well, they don't relax, they don't celebrate and coast. They recognize that 100,000 is the beginning of real financial stability, not the destination, and they keep going. The ones who struggle, they treat it like an arrival. They've made it, and that feeling of arrival quietly stops the engine. 250,000. This is where your relationship with work starts to change, meaningfully. Not because you can retire, you can't, but because you're no longer completely trapped by a paycheck. You have enough accumulated that a bad job, a toxic boss, a company that's heading nowhere, these things become optional in a way they genuinely weren't before. Some people use that optionality. They leave. They negotiate harder. They take a risk on something they actually believe in. Others don't. And this is fascinating to watch, because having the option to leave doesn't mean people leave. A lot of people reach 250,000 and stay exactly where they are. Same job, same complaints, same Sunday dread. But now they have savings. And somehow that makes it more confusing, not less, because they can't even use financial necessity as the reason anymore. They have to face the real reason, which is usually fear dressed up as practicality. 500,000 is a number that changes how you think about the future, not in an abstract someday way, in a real, tangible, I can actually see this working way. At this level, compound growth starts to feel real. You can watch the money make money, slowly at first, then less slowly. And there's a psychological shift that comes with that, a shift from feeling like you're fighting to accumulate, to feeling like the system is starting to work for you. That shift is hard to describe if you haven't felt it, but it's significant, because for most of your financial life up to this point, money has felt like something you chase, something that leaves faster than it comes, and then at some point, past a certain threshold, it starts to feel different, like the direction changed. Like gravity flipped. $1 million. I want to be careful here. Because the cultural mythology around $1 million is so loud and so distorted that it's almost impossible to talk about it clearly. $1 million is not the finish line. It's not the number where life becomes easy or problems dissolve or you finally feel like you've won. I know that's what movies and magazines and 100 YouTube thumbnails have implied, but it's not true. And the people who've gotten there will tell you, some of them quietly, some of them loudly, that the feeling they expected never fully arrived. What does arrive is something quieter and more real. It's the feeling of having built something that took years, something that required consistency when it would have been so much easier to spend. There's a dignity in that, a private dignity that has nothing to do with showing anyone, and that, honestly, is worth more than the number. Practically $1 million at a 4% withdrawal rate generates around $40,000 a year. That's not lavish. That's not retire to a yacht money. But it's real. It's a foundation. And for the first time in your financial life, you have the option, not the obligation, the option, to live on returns rather than labor. Whether you choose to or not is a different question. Most people don't. Most people with $1 million are still working, still earning, still building. Because by the time you have $1 million, you've usually developed the kind of habits and identity that make stopping feel strange. 2 million is where options become genuinely wide. 3 million is where most people, not all, but most, hit a point of what I'd call quiet sufficiency. Not extravagance, not excess, just enough. Clearly, undeniably enough. Where the financial question stops being, will I be okay, and starts being something more interesting, more personal. Something like, what do I actually want my life to look like now that I have the space to choose? And here's the emotional peak of all of this. The thing I want you to actually feel before we close. Most people spend their entire lives trying to get to a place where they feel financially secure. They work for it, worry about it, sacrifice for it, and then some of them get there. They cross the number they always told themselves would feel like enough. And they realize the security they were chasing wasn't really about the money. It was about the feeling they thought the money would bring. The feeling of being okay, of being safe, of being free from the low-grade terror that's been running underneath everything since the first time they understood that money was something you could run out of. Some people find that feeling at 50,000. Some never find it at 3 million, because it was never fully in the number. It was always partly in there. Yes, the numbers matter. I've just spent 20 minutes showing you how much they matter. But the other part, the deeper part, is the story you carry about whether you deserve to feel safe, whether you're the kind of person who gets to be okay. And that story, no savings account can fix on its own. So let me bring this back to you, right now, wherever you actually are, not where you wish you were, not the number you tell yourself you'll start taking seriously when you finally get to it, where you actually are today. Because here's what I've noticed, and I've thought about this a lot. Most people know roughly what level they're at. They know. They just don't look at it directly very often. It's easier to keep it slightly blurry. To know the general shape of the situation without really feeling the specific weight of it, and that blurriness is costing them. Not because awareness is magic. It isn't. Knowing your savings balance doesn't automatically change it. But there's something that happens when you stop looking away. When you actually sit with the number, whatever it is, without immediately reaching for an excuse or a distraction or a plan, you'll start on Monday. Something shifts, slowly, but it shifts. The people who move through these levels, who actually go from zero to something real, something that changes the texture of their daily life, they're not usually smarter. They're not always higher earners. They're not luckier most of the time. They just stopped pretending the number wasn't there. They looked at it. They felt uncomfortable. And then they made one small decision that was slightly better than the one they would have made the week before. And then another. And the thing about small decisions made consistently over time is that they don't feel like much while you're making them. They feel almost boring, almost too small to matter, until one day, they aren't small anymore. That's not a motivational line. I'm not trying to inspire you. I'm just telling you what actually happens. The mechanism is boring. The result is real. And I want to say one more thing before we close. Something I think about when I look at how people talk about money online. All the urgency, all the hustle, all the 10 steps to financial freedom energy that fills every corner of this space. Most of it is noise. Not because the information is always wrong, some of it is fine, but because it treats money like a performance, like something you optimize loudly and display publicly and measure against other people's numbers. And that's not what this is. Real financial progress is quiet. It happens in small moments that nobody sees, in the decision to not spend something you could have spent, in the choice to stay consistent when the market drops and everything feels uncertain, in the patience to let time do the work that urgency never could. It doesn't look like anything from the outside for a long time, and that's exactly why most people quit, because they can't see it working. They need feedback faster than the process gives it, so they stop, or they restart, or they look for something that promises results that feel more immediate. and the gap between where they are and where they could be quietly widens. Here's what I know. The levels we talked about today, from 0 to 3 million, they're not just financial checkpoints. They're different ways of experiencing being alive, different amounts of mental space, different relationships with fear and choice and time, and every single one of them is reachable from where you are right now. Not easily, not quickly, but reachable. The question isn't whether the path exists. It does. The question is whether you're willing to look at your number, your real number, and let it mean something, not as a judgment, not as a source of shame, but as honest information about where you're starting from, because you can't navigate from a location you're pretending isn't real. Most people will hear all of this and still miss it. They'll nod along, feel something for a moment, and then close the tab and go back to exactly what they were doing. And that's okay. That's human. That's what most people do with most things that matter. But a few will understand exactly what to do next. Not because I told them, but because something in this landed differently. Because they recognized themselves somewhere in these levels and felt something shift, something small and quiet and real. And they'll carry that somewhere useful. If you're one of those people, you already know it. And if this kind of thinking about money, the real psychology underneath the numbers, is something you want more of, then stick around. Not because I need the subscriber count, but because what we talk about here takes time to build. One video isn't enough. The real understanding comes from showing up consistently, just like the savings do. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole. Now go look at your number.